Are you in therapy and feeling frustrated that you aren't seeming to get anywhere? Like, you're showing up, you're doing the work, so why do you still feel like garbage? Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm Wackett. Thanks for joining me for another video as we work to empower and equip you with the confidence and skills to write your own story so that you can live your life on purpose. Today I want to talk about therapy, both through the lens of a licensed mental health therapist and as a client, to try to figure out what's keeping you stuck from progressing in therapy. Now, I felt this way as a client and a therapist. The stagnancy and annoyance where it seems like all you do is come in and give an update about your week or complain about the same things that were bothering you last session. You talk in circles around an issue, but stay tethered to the same anchor points. You start to wonder, what am I doing here? And is this even helping? You're already overwhelmed, you feel like you have little time and energy left to give, and you consider leaving. But then you wonder, is that what's best? Is the problem the therapist? Is it you? Is it therapy in general? Now, in some cases, the answer might absolutely be, this is not the right fit. It's time to look for a new therapist. But before we do that, let's consider a few other points that are likely showing up in the room with you. First, I want you to ask yourself, are you holding back? Are you sharing your whole self? Are you being honest about where you're at, what you need, how you feel, and how you're showing up to your life? Change can only occur in therapy when you're fully open with your therapist. They need to know you, your thoughts, feelings, behaviors, pain points. Otherwise, they'll always be operating from a different playbook. Not sharing our whole selves is usually a sign of one of two things. First is a lack of trust or a fear of judgment. Are you worried that your therapist is going to judge you? I mean, I've had clients that have lied about substance use because they were afraid I'd treat them differently. I've had clients not disclose parts of their identity because of uncertainty about how I might respond. If you lack trust, consider what it would look like to build it. Tell your therapist about fears or worries that you have. See how they react to this so that you can get some insight into how they might respond as you share more parts about yourself. Now, I want you to ask yourself in this if you do actually have any data to support the notion that this person isn't safe to explore these things with. If so, stop watching this video. If they've maybe said, done something that's made you feel like they're not going to show up with safety, kindness, compassion, then you know this isn't the right fit for you, and you can move on and find a new therapist. But if there's a chance that you're projecting fear onto them because of other experiences and anxieties, internalized biases, you're doing both you and them a disservice, and you're keeping support at an arm's length away. Now, the second thing that happens is shame. This in many ways connects to that fear of judgment. Shame is the fear of being seen as unworthy or not enough. So when we feel shame about something that we've done or do, how we think, we'll work to hide it or avoid it at all costs. This might also be the case if you've had a hard time naming something as a problem. I've had new moms hesitate to tell me some of the thoughts that run through their heads about their children or being a parent because of their shame. They fear that this makes them a bad parent and worry about how I might respond. A friend of mine has never discussed his use of substances in therapy because of his own shame about them and his resistance to naming this as a problematic behavior. He's fine and it's under control, so why should he talk about it? Anything that you feel like is better left in the shadows is 100% tainted by shame. Okay, the second thing I want you to consider is, do you know what you're working on? So when you start therapy, you do an intake. Part of the intake goal is to identify your goals for treatment. This is meant to give you a roadmap of where you want to go, and then you and your therapist make a plan for how to get there. I can't tell you how many people have shared with me that they've never once had a goals conversation with a treatment provider, or that they can remember talking about goals, but they couldn't tell me what they were and hadn't talked about them since their intake. Therapy is a goal-oriented process. It's finite and dependent on reaching milestones. If you're unclear on where you're going, you're gonna find yourself venturing down whatever path looks good to you in session or gets you away from your current state of suffering the quickest. I call this goal drifting and problem hopping, or the experience wherein your focus and goals just kind of hops around and changes each week depending on whatever's bothering you most. But this therapy method is incredibly unhelpful as it focuses the work on managing the symptoms rather than addressing the root cause of pain. Productive work isn't always focused on what happened between sessions, but is about deeper diving into both insight building and action. There has to be some regimentation to the process and an anchoring on the topic or goal. That doesn't mean what's happening outside of sessions isn't stressful. There are absolutely times that the acuity of this pain warrants a sidestep from your longer-term goals. Still, for the most part, it's about focusing on small, 1% graded changes and not allowing yourself to get swept up in the distress of a moment or moments. If this is happening to you, talk about it with your therapist. Clarify the goals of your work together and set a proposed timeline. Discuss how to manage and defend against that drive to focus on that loudest pain point each session and instead stay the course to work on the long-term goal. All right, third, are you afraid to move forward? Now, this one might seem strange, but many people get stuck in this cycle of the goal drifting and problem hopping because it's comfortable. They might not be happy, but man, is it predictable. They know what to expect with their crappy job, their unfulfilling relationship, and mediocre friendships. They don't like it, but they know how to function inside of it. And they begin to see their therapist as the person that allows them to vent and reset each session so that they can keep circling round and round without actually making changes. Now, this is a tricky place to be because this is usually motivated by shame and the belief that you're either incapable of making any changes or undeserving of a life other than this, coupled by an attachment to this pain. These stories come to define you, and if you let these go and try to write something different in your story, what would happen? How will people see you? But change can only occur through grieving, preparation, action, and healing. There has to be space for all four of these phases, and it isn't easy. I have a client right now who's had conversations with me about this and the fear of what it would mean to be better and how their diagnoses and pain define them for so long. So they've become afraid of who they'd be without it, or if that wasn't the forwardmost part of themselves. Now, there's no way to make change comfortable for the brain. We're honestly wired against it. But ask yourself if it's worth it to you in the long run and what opportunities you might be counting yourself out of if you don't give yourself the possibility that things could be better. All right, number 4, are you and your therapist working towards the same endpoint? So like knowing where you're going, are you sure you and your therapist are working towards the same goals? Now, I've done this with clients before where they've identified drinking as a problem or agree that they have an eating disorder, but when I focus our work on abstinence and recovery, I'm met with resistance. Now, there's a difference between admitting something is a problem or might be a problem and wanting to do anything about it. So are you and your therapist on the same page about what the problems are and how you want to address them? And that could mean in the short term as well as the long term. So one way to ensure that you're on the same page at the end of each session is to both write down or share aloud your summary of what you did in the session, how it connects to your goals, and the work that you're both going to be thinking about or doing before next session or when you come into the next session. All right, number 5. Ooh, this one's tricky, but I want you to ask yourself if your therapist is working harder than you are. Again, this is a hard question to sit with, but who's working hardest in the room and why? As a therapist, I'm doing us both a disservice if I'm working harder for you than you are for yourself. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not supposed to be putting in a significant amount of work and making sure I'm showing up and holding up my end of the bargain. Still, if you're not fighting for life and working towards your goals with greater ferocity than me, this becomes about me, and it's only going to result in resentment and tension between us. So you have to be the one working hardest for your life, both in and out of the therapy room. Next, I want you to ask yourself, have you already decided that therapy won't work? So in many cases, clients come into therapy already assuming it's not going to work. The two biggest culprits, shame and biases or misunderstandings about therapy. People have heard it doesn't work, or they've had a bad experience in the past, so they come in assuming it's not going to work now. It can also feel safer to assume it won't work rather than have hope, because hope might mean that you're going to get crushed if things don't get better or work out in the timeline you expect. Many clients have come in telling me they have a certain modality, like cognitive behavioral therapy, that they hate and that this will not work for them, or they set rules about how something will or won't go. They come in defining our relationship before we've even had a chance to meet and dictate the terms of our work. They tell me what they will and will not do, or shut down new ideas, or seem hopeless about any possibility or idea that I might mention in session. All of this is a result of fear, shame, and a drive to maintain some sense of control for likely someone who's felt out of it for so long. And this makes total sense. If this has showed up for you, let go of judgment around it and find compassion. What do you need to do to let go and allow the possibility that therapy might be helpful for you? How can you switch from creating a self-fulfilling prophecy to being in a state of discovery? The last point is to ask yourself, is this the right time for this kind of work? If you notice that any of the above are true for you, but you're resistant to do anything about it or them, or overwhelmed at the thought, it might be time to consider if now is the right time for therapy. I've had many clients come in believing they were ready and or that this was the type of support they needed, only to find out it wasn't. So while the work may be helpful and necessary, sometimes we need to consider our lives in the context of everything going on and check in if you can show up the way that you need and want to for therapy to be effective for you. Maybe you have to take a few steps back before you're ready to jump in. Perhaps you recognize some internal stories that need to shift in order for you to engage more openly. Or maybe you have to take time to get clear on what role therapy is playing and what you're looking for from it. The question then to ask yourself is, how would I know when I am ready? And what does it look like to get myself from here to there? Okay, so after listening to all of this, many of us are going, okay, so now what? If walking through this, you can see how some of these pieces might be showing up for you, then consider what it would look like to bring them up in session. And if you're feeling stuck or unsure about how to do that, or honestly just anxious because it would overwhelm me too, drop a comment below and let's brainstorm some ways to bring it up together. I can also assure you that you're not being a jerk by telling your therapist you need something different or more from them. We're not supposed to be everything for everyone, and oftentimes we as therapists get it wrong. Letting us know what you need is a sign that you feel safe with us and is such a gift to be able to have that conversation with you. At the end of all of this, you might still reach the conclusion that your therapist or coach or whatever provider you thought about in the context of this video isn't the right fit, either because of your own comfort with them or the way that you're engaging in therapy, or again, just knowing it might not be the right time. That's entirely normal and happens to a lot of us. The biggest thing is to know that you're willing to consider these pieces for yourself, not only to check in with where you're at, but because it helps clarify for you in the future what you might be looking for from and in therapy. So as we wrap for today, I would love to hear your biggest aha from this video, and of course, any ways that I can support you as you think about making some of those internal shifts in how you're showing up for the work, and those external shifts in how you're connecting with your providers. If you aren't yet getting my AR Insider emails, make sure that you click the link in the show notes to get yourself on that list to get exclusive and supportive content in your inbox that I don't share anywhere else. And if you liked this video, please like and share it with someone that you think needs to hear it. And of course, hit that subscribe button if you want to stay in the know on everything that's going on. Remember, you have the right to author your own story. So let's go get that pen back. I'll see you next time.